Welcome back to Network Africa. Now, the Obama administration is looking to waive long-standing human rights conditions on aid to Egypt. This move is raising questions from rights groups which say that Egypt is experiencing its worst period of human rights abuses in modern history, and lawmakers are making reference to a toddler who was recently convicted on murder charges. Secretary of State Mr. John Kerry acknowledged in congressional budget hearings this week that there are disturbing arrests and there are also disturbing sentences, but defended the administration's stance by pointing to Egypt's strategic importance to the United States. Secretary Kerry further explained that U.S. has got a huge interest in making sure that Egypt doesn't go down into a more difficult status than what is already the case. Analysts and the executive director of the Project on Middle East Democracy call to formally omit human rights as a condition a disappointing move. The latter deems this the worst period for human rights abuses, as well as the closure of political space in Egypt's modern history. Joining us from Cairo is the Voice of America's Edward Yeranian. Edward, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure, Cynthia.
Now, we know that Egypt is important to the United States in terms of advancing peace and stability in the Middle East. But the question analysts are asking is, why should the United States compromise on the matter of removing human rights conditions from aid to Egypt?
Well, human rights as the basis of foreign policy has never really worked in American history. Jimmy Carter tried it very unsuccessfully. We got the Iranian regime. Analysts were saying at the time that Iran was having unprecedented oppression under the Shah, and that the Secret Service was torturing people, the Savak, and look what we got. It was a lot worse. I think with all Egypt's flaws, and certainly it has many, with all its human rights abuses, and I'm sure you could certainly count them, the alternative is even worse. We've got the Islamic State running amok in nearby Libya. There are absolutely no human rights there, and even if the Islamic State is not controlling the situation, the other Islamic militias and even the chaos is worse than any human rights oppression in Egypt.
Now, it's also starting to come across, as though the U.S. is deliberately turning a blind eye to the apparent human rights issues. That's what analysts are saying based on the bigger picture. My question is, are there any consequences that the United States could suffer in the long run due to this move?
Well, certainly if the Muslim Brotherhood were to come back to power, they would have some sort of hostility, latent hostility to the United States. I could imagine that happening. But at the same time, you can't predict who's going to come to power down the road. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen with Bashar al-Assad in Syria. I mean, I don't know that anyone can guess what's going to happen in Egypt 5 years from now.
Yes.
And even with Egypt's human rights abuses, the situation, there certainly have been some effect from the revolution on the way people govern the country. I mean, there's no question about it. People on the street definitely do have some impact in calling the shots and saying, complaining about what their leaders are doing. You can see that in the president's speeches. He's obviously much more responsive to what public opinion is saying than President Mubarak ever used to be. Yeah. So, I mean, with all its flaws, it's certainly a little bit better than it was before.
Well, Edward Yeranian from the Voice of America, thank you so much for joining us on Network Africa.
My pleasure, Cynthia.
Now, staying in Egypt, a petrol station in the capital, Cairo, is defying tradition and hiring women to work as attendants. Up until now, petrol stations were staffed almost exclusively by men.
All over the world, the adage that whatever can be done by a man could be done much better by a woman is being made manifest daily, and Egypt is no exception. In this service station in the upscale neighborhood of Mahdi, history is being made. For the first time, women are being hired to work in what has been until now a male-dominated field. Petrol station attendants is a common low-income job in Cairo. Each station employs between 10 and 20 attendants, depending on the size and location.
A lot of people applied for the job. We handpicked a few of them who we felt were qualified, as there were very specific job requirements.
In Madi, 7 women stand in uniform filling up petrol tanks alongside their male counterparts. According to the station manager, Muhammad Ibrahim, the women were carefully vetted to ensure they were right for the job. After the first selection, the new recruits were trained on floor safety measures, first aid techniques and fire drills. For Abra Mohammed, she has received a boost in her confidence.
This is a new job and a new idea. When we first started to work here, we were very apprehensive about what people might say and worried that we wouldn't be able to do the job right or be up to par.
Currently, the female employees only fill car tanks with petrol. They don't carry out any car maintenance like changing tires or vehicle lubrication. But there is the opportunity for them to take on more senior managerial posts.
And finally, last week we asked you how you thought things would play out in Burundi after the visit of the 5-man AU delegation, and our top feedback is coming from Sheriff Essison. According to him, it's very hard to predict the outcome of that outing, but one thing that's certain is that it's going to be a complex process. Have a nice day. Have a nice day to you too, Sheriff Essison, and thank you very much for your feedback. On that note, here's our question of the day. How are you coping with the fuel scarcity situation? Feel free to send us your feedback either via email or Twitter. The address and handles are right there on your screen. Thank you so much for watching Network Africa on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are.